In this video, I'm going to talk to you about what a calorie deficit actually is, how to create one, and why it's important for your own progress. So before we get into it, what is a calorie deficit? Well, in short, a calorie deficit is simply consuming less calories than you burn, thus creating a measurement to measure energy. And our bodies are governed by something called thermodynamics, which in simple terms is known as energy balance, i.e. energy we've got going out, your body will store that surplus of energy for later use. And that is what your stored body fat is. It's the conversion of energy into fat to be burned at a later date when your body needs to, which is why we then need to create a deficit if we want to reduce body fat, because we need to essentially be taking less energy in than we're burning so that our body is forced to tap into those stores and those reserves of fat to bridge the gap between what we're burning and what we're consuming. It is worth noting that there is a difference between the energy that we burn in terms of fats and carbohydrates for energy release and in terms of losing body fat. Losing body fat is the sole outcome of consistently eating less calories than we burn, whereas carbohydrates and dietary fats that we eat will be used as energy to fuel our body depending on the type of activity that we're doing. I'll talk about that more in a completely separate video. Now, when it comes to fat loss, as I said, that is governed purely by consistently eating less calories than we burn. And the reason why that is the case for all living mammals, think about it. If your dog was overweight, you would probably give it less food and walk it more. In the same way that if you had a hamster that was overweight, you'd encourage it to go in its little wheel as much as possible and you'd probably feed it less. Us humans are exactly the same. If we have eating way more calories than you burn for an extended period of time, and in order to change that, you've got to start eating less than you burn. It doesn't need to be significantly less, and the larger the size of your calorie deficit that you go for, as much as you will see quicker results, the harder you'll probably find it to stick to. So it's important to get that balance right. But to explain it visually for you, I'm going to use the whiteboard behind. As you can see, this is what your body actually burns each day. This is known as your total daily energy expenditure, or TDEE. This includes both your resting and your non-resting activity. About 70% of the calories that you burn each day will be burned just because you're alive. So even if you don't move and get out of bed all day, you're still going to burn 70% of the calories that you usually burn. What's then known as your NEAT, or your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, will make up about 15 to 20% of the calories that you burn each day. And this is made up of all of the activity that you do in general throughout the day. This can be your step count, gesticulating when you talk, cleaning the house, washing the car, mowing the lawn, even having a wank. We then have the thermic effect of food, and this is the calories that are burned to digest the food that you're eating. The more protein that you eat, the greater amount of calories you'll burn each day from the thermic effect of food, because 30% of the calories consumed from protein will be burned to digest it. It's significantly less for carbohydrates and fats, so increasing your protein intake does help increase your thermic effect of food, but at best it's probably going to equate to about 10% of the calories that you burn each day. That leaves the 5 to 10%, and that is your planned exercise. Now obviously the more active you are, the more calories you will burn from your planned exercise, but it still makes up a very small portion of the total amount of calories that you burn. But understanding where your TDEE is a fundamental part to being able to create a deficit. It's also very important to be able to highlight where people typically have been going wrong, because what most people have when they're gaining body fat, as you can see here, is burning. So all of this extra energy gets stored. The way that we create a deficit in order to counteract that, start eating less than what your TDEE is. And by bringing yourself into that sensible deficit, you gradually lose fat. The bigger the deficit, the faster the results. But what you need to appreciate is the faster your results come, the harder it will be to hold on to those results. As you can see from this here, your results and your adherence to the plan basically form a spectrum. The closer you are to this side, the easier it will be to stick to. The trouble is, the easier that you make it to stick to, the further you are away from your results, which can make it very difficult, because if you're not seeing results, you're probably going to give up what you're doing. And let's be honest, if it's far too easy to stick to, you're probably not doing enough to get results in the first place. On the flip side, the closer you get to results, the further you are away from it being easy to stick to. So whilst that is great in the short term for seeing rapid results, if it's near impossible for you to stick to long term, you're eventually going to give up and rebound back to where you were beforehand. So the key to creating a sensible deficit is so that you can sit somewhere in the the middle so that you get results quick enough to keep you interested, but with a plan that's easy enough to stick to and implement long term, that it doesn't feel too difficult. Where most people go wrong is they focus primarily on trying to get results as quickly as physically possible, and they do that by avoiding all joy. And when you've got fuck all to enjoy, you've got no real reason to stick to it, because it doesn't matter how good the results are. If it sucks a bag of dicks, you won't want to stick to it for very long. Think about it this way. We've probably all had a job that we hated to the point where we had to leave. And when you get to that point where you have to leave that job, they could offer you double your salary. But the reality is it's not going to change a fucking thing. And within a few weeks, you're still going to want to leave that job. Your diet is exactly the same. If you make it too fucking difficult, it doesn't matter how quick the results are, you're not going to stick to it. So being able to understand how many calories you burn each day and how to create a sensible deficit that sits results versus adherence is essential for your long-term success. The method that you use to create that deficit will vary from person to person based on your own dietary preferences. But when it comes to creating your deficit, the things you want to maintain, irrespective of your dietary preferences, are that your deficit isn't too large, that you include the food that you enjoy eating, and that you continue to eat in a way in which feels normal and natural to you. If you can do all of that whilst creating a calorie deficit, you've got a much greater chance of staying consistent long enough to get the results that you're after, whilst also being able to apply that method to a long-term lifestyle that means you can actually maintain those results when you achieve them. Now, whilst there are going to be elements that are just as important to your overall health, such as nutrient quality, and there may also be conditions that you've got that reduce the amount of calories you burn at rest, none of these factors play outside of the realms of energy balance or thermodynamics, which means, in short, in the absence of a calorie deficit, you quite simply cannot drop body fat. And every pound of fat that has ever been lost by any person ever, or animal for that, has been done so through a calorie deficit, which is why it's absolutely essential, if your goal is fat loss, for you to understand what your total daily energy expenditure looks like so that you can create a sensible deficit off the back of that includes the food that you enjoy and allows you to create a lifestyle you can actually stick to for the long term. If you can do that, you're going to get great results, and it's not going to feel like an arse ache. I hope you found this video useful with regards to understanding what a calorie deficit is, how to create one, and why it's important for reaching your goals.